Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for this legislative update and Q&A with Senate President Pro Tem Tim Ashe and Speaker of the House Mitzi Johnson. First, I just want to say how grateful I am to all of you. First, my name is Jared Duval, Executive Director of the Energy Action Network. But I'm so grateful to all of you. Over 100 people signed up for this webinar in the span of just 5 days, which really speaks to the commitment to and interest in these important issues. I also want to thank Senator Ashe and Speaker Johnson for prioritizing this event and taking the time to join us during a busy time for them just ahead of the legislature reconvening later this month. Before I introduce our speakers, let me just begin with a little bit of background. On the webinar today are dozens of town energy committee leaders, representatives of statewide and local grassroots advocacy organizations, healthcare professionals, leaders in the faith community, student leaders and college professors, renewable energy and energy efficiency contractors, utilities, auto dealers, fuel dealers, community action agencies, regional planning commissions, state representatives and state senators, leaders of state agencies and departments, and staff from our federal congressional delegation, and many others playing pivotal roles in creating a clean energy economy. That is the breadth and diversity of the Energy Action Network. For those who don't know, EAN is a network of over 200 member organizations and public partners who share a common mission to achieve Vermont's 90% by 2050 total energy commitment to renewable energy and to significantly reduce Vermont's greenhouse gas emissions in ways that create a more just, thriving, and sustainable future for Vermonters. The network is supported by a backbone nonprofit organization that serves as a neutral and trusted convener of many diverse members and member perspectives. To uphold this role, EAN does not lobby for or against specific bills in the legislature, nor on cases before the PUC, the Public Utilities Commission. That said, as a network, we have collectively identified policy and regulatory reform as a key area for needed attention and progress in order to meet Vermont's energy and climate commitments. And many of our network members individually do engage in policy advocacy. So finally, while we do not take positions as an entire network, our annual summit does provide an opportunity for network members to express support for different proposals that are before the network. And last year, the two most popular ideas shared at our summit were number one, that of a Global Warming Solutions Act, which was presented by Lauren Hurl of Vermont Conservation Voters. And second, the idea of energy efficiency modernization, which was jointly presented by Rebecca Foster of Efficiency Vermont and Kristen Carlson of Green Mountain Power. Both of these ideas have been key legislative priorities this session, as we'll hear more about from Senator Ashe and Speaker Johnson shortly. Before we begin, I just want to say a couple of more words about logistics so folks have a sense of how this event is going to unfold. We'll first hear about 10 minutes each, perhaps a little bit longer, of updates and plans for the remainder of the legislative session from Senator Ashe and Speaker Johnson. And then we'll have about 20 to 30 minutes or so for network member and guest attendee question and answer. During and after the remarks from Senator Ashe and Speaker Johnson, all attendees will have the ability to ask questions using the Q&A function in Zoom. You can click on Q&A in your Zoom screen. You can do this right now if you want. It opens the Q&A window. You'll be able to see all of the questions that get posed by other attendees, and we ask you to upvote questions that you like and would like to see posed to Speaker Johnson and Senator Ashe by clicking on the thumbs up button below each question that you see there. I will generally look for the questions with the most upvotes and then invite the person who wrote the question to temporarily join the webinar as a panelist so you can pose your question directly by video in your own voice. To help facilitate this, please rename yourself in Zoom if needed so that your name and organizational affiliation is clearly stated. And to keep things on schedule, please just ask the question as you wrote it and keeping it succinct and to the point. After you've asked the question, you'll go back to an attendee role. I also want to note that while we are in, I just want to note that we are in campaign season, but this is not a campaign event. We are talking with Representative Johnson and Senator Ashe in their capacities as the current speaker and Senate president respectively. So please keep questions focused on the remainder of this current legislative session and their work in those roles. Okay, so with that, it is now my pleasure to introduce Senate President Pro Tem Tim Ashe. Senator Ashe, I would just want to say, by way of introduction, has demonstrated his commitment to making meaningful policy progress on energy and climate, with a continuous focus on equity and what decisions mean for lower and middle income Vermonters. 3 of his top priorities this year: the Global Warming Solutions Act, which passed the Senate not long ago by a vote of 23-5, the Transportation and Climate Initiative, and efficiency modernization have been priorities of many EAN network members. He's brought more of an energy focus to the Senate Transportation Committee, on which he sits, and has worked closely with Senator Bray of Senate Natural Resources and Energy to move energy and climate issues forward. Personally, I just want to say, each of the last 2 years, the first legislator to reach out to me to request a meeting after EAN published our annual progress report on energy and emissions has been Senator Ashe. When I've met with Senator Ashe in his office, I've appreciated his deep engagement in these issues, his commitment to understanding nuance and detail, and his focus on data-driven and evidence-based policymaking. Senator Ashe is also engaged with EAN members at our annual summit, not only attending to give remarks, but sticking around to engage with members before and after. So I am looking forward to hearing the Senator's update on where we stand as we head into the August session. Senator Ashe, the floor is yours.
Well, thanks, Jared. And what you've just described is a person with perhaps a frustrated social life. Me, not you. So
me too.
Thanks for the overview. I would say that when the speaker and I, back in either December or January, met with the press to talk about some of the themes that we expected to take up this year, much of what you just said was on that list. And the Global Warming Solutions Act was on the radar of both House and Senate leadership. And the House, I can't remember precisely when it was sent over, but I think just before we wound up shutting the State House down, if my memory serves me right. And we had made a commitment that we would focus in those early days after the pandemic hit on COVID response legislation. And so there was a lot of nervousness across the board. Would this bill or that bill still have a chance to make it? And there was a certain point, probably in early May, where the speaker and I said, we have the capacity to now start moving forward with some of the other bills. And so the Global Warming Solutions Act did pass the Senate in mid-June. The vote was a very strong vote, with several Republicans joining us, as well as some of the Democrats who maybe in the past, let's just say some people might have been surprised that they cast yes votes. The changes between the House and Senate bills are fairly modest by my reading, and I would describe more as process differences, membership of work, of the work groups that are going to be created, things like that, not fundamental points of disagreement. The efficiency modernization bill, that was sent over to the House and is, I believe, in the House Energy and Technology Committee. I'll let the speaker talk about that, but really reflects a multi-year attempt to start shifting our thinking about efficiency work away from a straight electric efficiency utility model to one that evolves to also address thermal and transportation efficiency. And as someone who's old-fashioned when it comes to this, I am concerned with cross-subsidizing sectors. So it's a challenging realm to get a handle on, except we know that our electric efficiency program has done wonderful work for the couple decades it's been in place, but that our transportation and thermal focus has been much less aggressive. And so S337, to oversimplify perhaps for those who are less familiar, creates a multi-year pilot that authorizes the use of a couple $1 million a year by Efficiency Vermont to move into these other areas and see how we can move forward with something akin to an all fuels efficiency utility without some of the potentially legal or equity driven concerns from the past. I do want to mention that transportation budget continues to be, because I'm on that committee, a focus as part of these discussions. I think the EAN report, the most shocking elements of it are almost always on the transportation side. And so one of the things we've done each of the last 2 years is created what I call the environmental budget. So it pulls out all of the investments that are being made in the transportation sector that contribute to or reduce the contributions to harmful emissions from the transportation sector. I'll post a link to the bill in the chat room in a second. But as you start to visualize what is in our transportation budget and some of the ancillary bills like the capital bill, then you can start to say, what have we been doing as our baseline to determine what we might do additionally? And among the strategies that are in there are park and ride facilities, where very quietly we've significantly increased the total number of spaces last year, and in this year's construction season it's going to be an increase of almost 35% more than existed just 2 or 3 years ago. The amount of money being spent on charging stations, both for general community use but also at state properties, bike and pedestrian projects throughout the state, which are really critical. And so people can read through that, and I found it a very powerful tool. And maybe because I'm a bit of a geek, but one of the things that happens usually is the transportation bill would come up for a vote in either the Senate or the House. And all the members of the transportation committees know a lot about what's in that transportation budget and transportation bill. But the bill itself is actually not very rich with information. And it's because there's one sentence which effectively says, by voting for this, you are adopting a big, thick white binder that very few legislators have actually looked at. And so I think the House and Senate transportation committees have been really doing a great job of trying to highlight what actually lays behind that bill so that we can make good decisions moving forward. S220 is another bill I want to call attention to. This is being worked on now. We sent it fairly late before we left in June. But I know the House Government Operations Committee knew that this was coming and has been looking at these issues generally. It doesn't at first signal what it is. It's about professional licensure. But this is where many EAN members were very interested in embedding energy and environmental instruction in the licensure process for a variety of professionals, whether it be plumbers, electricians, architects, landscape architects, all the different licensed professionals whose work can have a helpful contribution to meeting our energy goals. And I'll put a link to that one. Basically, the second half of the bill is almost all new continuing education requirements and licensure requirements, so that people really understand how their work impacts our collective challenges. Two last things, and then I'll wrap. The first is Transportation Climate Initiative. I've been very, very committed to moving forward. I would be dishonest if I didn't say that the pandemic has really thwarted the timing, both for the legislature to consider it, but also for the people who are actually negotiating the final agreement to put before states. So I don't have a simple answer on timing of any movement on TCI at this point, but just wanted to flag that. It was one of the items, Jared, that you mentioned at the beginning. And the other one, I think the bill number is S267. This is the bill that would accelerate the state's 100% renewable requirements and increase the percentage of renewable power generated here in Vermont. This one has been taken up in Senate Finance. It did not get voted out. And we can have a discussion about this. I'll just say the challenge has been the assertion or characterization of the bill as one that's going to have very upward impacts on rates for utility payers. And while there's a healthy amount of debate about that, I think that's been its big challenge. So I would be curious about EAN members' interest in any elements of that bill that may be the ones that are more ready for prime time. for possible consideration in the fall. I got some more to say, but I'd like to hand it over to the speaker, or Jared, back to you to introduce the speaker.
Thank you, Senator Ashe. So now I'd like to introduce Speaker Mitzi Johnson. Since the beginning of this session, the speaker has made clear that climate has been one of her top priorities, especially the Global Warming Solutions Act, which she brought to the floor and oversaw passage of by a 105 to 37 tripartisan vote. Additionally, Speaker Johnson has selected and empowered very knowledgeable and committed energy and climate leaders to chair two key committees of jurisdiction in the House: House Energy and Technology, chaired by Representative Tim Briglin, and House Transportation, chaired by Representative Kurt McCormick, both of whom have engaged frequently with EAN. And Speaker Johnson has long made clear that clean energy solutions and doing our part on the climate crisis are a top priority in the House, reflected in tasking all House committees to focus on climate action, as well as prioritizing strategic planning and the accountability framework that the Global Warming Solutions Act represents. Speaker Johnson, thank you for your leadership and service, and please take it away.
All right, thank you, Jared, and welcome everybody. Really terrific that folks are willing to tackle one more Zoom meeting in this climate right now. I'm really excited about the things that we will be able to wrap up in this this next August-September session and get to the governor's desk and basically allow the governor to show Vermonters where he stands on these things. The Global Warming Solutions Act has been mentioned by both Senator Ashe and Jared, and really it was a tremendous effort, and want to give a huge shout out to Representatives Briglin and Sibilia for their work across party lines and really looking at both the energy and ecological side and the rural resilience side for small towns. More and more people are understanding how tied together those things are, and so I think their partnership on that and really building a strong case for why climate change is the #1 issue affecting all of us in the long term. I think all of their work was reflected in this incredible vote that we got from members from every party, and really pleased with that. We kicked off the session with that, and handed it to the Senate basically at the beginning of third week of February. I think it was a bit before town meeting, and grateful that they invested the time in getting it back to us. So come August, September, we are going to be looking at kind of the financial aspect to kind of pair the money back up with the policy to get it across the finish line and get it to the governor's desk. I appreciate, Jared, you mentioning some of the committee issues we've done. People often look to specific policies and bill numbers to track somebody's record, and I think a lot of my record in the environmental work here is about committee structure and who I've put in various places, because the person at the head of the table kind of corralling the discussion and leading that discussion is really key to creating not only a good product, but really trying to filter out which things are the most important for a stronger, healthier future for Vermont. And having created the Energy and Technology Committee to 3.5 years ago now, was a big step in saying, look, this issue has fallen through the cracks because it's everybody's problem, which kind of makes it nobody's specific responsibility. So by creating that committee and tasking them with something like that was terrific. That initial step a few years ago was to say every committee needs to do something, and just about every committee in the House did step forward and say, here's a piece within our jurisdiction that helps to reduce our climate impact and mitigate the impact of climate change on Vermonters. And so just by doing that, we made sure to get everybody in the legislature, in the House, familiar with the concept and have their fingerprints on something that makes a difference for their community. On the transportation side, Representative McCormick has been fantastic. That was a drastic shift, and I caught some flack for appointing a chair of transportation that doesn't own a car. But you know, I think that was a critical step in saying, look, here's somebody that knows that it can be done and that can help to wrestle with some of these major transportation issues that we have on the climate front. You all know that transportation is our #1 climate offender. And again, in building a broader coalition to move the agenda forward, transportation is also a huge barrier for low-income people to get to work, to build self-sufficiency. And so, so one of the things that Representative Kurt McCormick has brought to the table is a real strong understanding and advocacy for public transportation. And so we've been able to try to move more money there and look at a lot of things with that lens of a better integrated system, public transportation system. So to not just get from, you know, the north end of Burlington to downtown Burlington, but how do you get from Danville to Williston? And really looking at that system is very important. One of the things, another I think very significant climate bill is the Act 250 bill that's moved through the House. The Senate's done quite a bit of work on it, and you know, so the Senator Ashe and I are working on wrapping that up and getting it across the finish line as well. And key pieces of this legislation incentivize more concentrated development, incentivize downtown infill, and really making sure that we're counteracting sprawl, because it's not just about a more efficient car or using public transportation or ride sharing or whatnot to get where you want to go. Ultimately, we need to reduce the need to get faraway places, you know, for work and errands and all that kind of stuff. And so the Act 250 bill has a huge impact on how development moves forward in the state of Vermont to make sure that we have environmentally friendly development patterns moving forward. So I think that is because it's, I think, deep in the weeds and really tricky. It often gets overlooked, but I think that has a huge environmental and transportation and climate impact. Yeah, I think I will just wait for questions on that rather than go into some of the details. We have a very active global warming, climate change caucus in the House and in the legislature, and having I think a very good part of my chairs, I don't know off the top of my head the exact percentage, but a significant number of House chairs are also members of the Climate Caucus. And so I have regular communications with them, and we've been able to structure communications between my office and the Climate Caucus in ways that we can really deploy those members in each committee to make sure that any legislation being developed has that climate lens, and we can kind of move things, bend the curve towards, towards more responsible use of our resources and better protection of the world we live in. I think the final piece I'll chat about is internet connectivity. It doesn't usually easily fall into environmental work, but when you consider transportation is our biggest climate offender, having more ways for people to work, get information, be entertained, be educated, from wherever their laptop is versus by getting in a car, it's going to help our overall emissions standards. And this pandemic has probably accelerated a flexible work and work from home environment, probably 10 years over what it would have normally been, looking at the trajectory of how work from home has expanded in the last few years. And so we are now using legislative levers to try to help Vermont catch up with that, so that post-pandemic, when we finally get through this, it is a viable option for people to continue to work from home if they choose. And one of the ways that we're doing that is investing as much money as we can in expansion of broadband and internet options for people. And we've the restrictions by the federal government, and specifically the time limit of the federal dollars, really crimped our style in what we wanted to invest. But I think we did an excellent job of trying to build out, investing money to build out broadband, to make sure that we were expanding opportunities for work from home, learning from home, and healthcare from home as much as possible. So I think those are some of the, between all of the great information that Senator Ashe started out with and the addition of those things, I think that represents a pretty good picture of what we've been doing this last session to really help meet our climate goals and set us up for more robust conversations come January as well.
Great. Thank you so much, Speaker Johnson. For folks who joined after we got started, and just as a reminder to everyone else, the way we're going to handle the next portion of question and answer is on your Zoom screen, you'll see a Q&A icon that you can click on, where you can see questions that other folks have posed, and click the thumbs up button if you like it to upvote it, so we can see which questions folks most want to see answered by Speaker Johnson and Senator Ashe. So I'm going to then ask folks to pose those questions directly, and please keep it to the question that you've posed there, so that we can kind of keep on track time-wise and get to a number of questions. So first, I'm going to invite Steve Meyer. Steve, I hope I'm pronouncing your last name correctly. Correct me if I got it wrong when you join. And then after that, I'll invite Chris Granda to join. But Steve, we're going to answer your question next, and I'm going to promote you to panelist right now, so you can ask it via video.
There we go.
Great.
Hi,
Hi,
Steve.
friends. Speaker Johnson, Senator Ashe, good to be with you today. Thanks for joining us. My question was related to another difference I understand between the Global Warming Solution Act as passed by the House and the version passed by the Senate, in that I may have some of the details not quite completely together, but my understanding was that the Senate version had deleted sections related to staffing and funding, and that remains an issue that needs to be worked out between the two bodies. And my question was, can you commit to including the necessary funding and staffing that's necessary for implementing the act in the final bill? Thanks.
Maybe I'll take the lead, since I think that's primarily a Senate question. Yes, it is true that the Senate pulled that particular provision, but we're very clear at the time that the reasons were really two. One is that we are saving most of the full year budget additions to the full year budget that we are going to be developing and adopting when we go back into the State House in late August. So there were other bills as well where positions were included for a particular new activity that were pulled so that they'd then be reconsidered when we came out. Excuse me. The second issue is one that I think we just didn't quite have enough time to determine the level of funding and staffing that are completely necessary to carry out the work. On the one hand, we have the administration who believe, and I know Peter Walk, I believe, is listening in here, with a level of effort of new staffing that was required. We wanted to make sure we understood better before committing the dollars. So we are going to fund it to get the work done. It's just we were saving it for the full year budget when we come back.
Yeah, I have nothing to add to that. We weren't really in a position to be appropriating extra money, when we were just doing the quarter year budget.
Jared, if I may, Jared, and I suspect the speaker would agree with this one. One of our tasks when we come back, because that was one of the questions in advance that you asked us to think about, is also making sure that whatever the financial picture is, we're preserving as much of the progress we've been making and not seeing those cut out of the picture. And that is a range of agencies that we don't know quite what the governor's team will be coming forward with in terms of budget changes. And Steve, you've been in the budget environment in state government before, but one of our less glamorous tasks is to make sure we're not cutting the good things that are already embedded in our budget. This is obviously something additional that we've committed to.
Thank you, Steve, for the question. I'm going to move now to Chris Granda for your question. Just give me 1 second, and I'm going to promote you. Here we go. Hi, Chris.
Chris, if you're speaking, we can't hear you yet for reasons unclear.
Yeah, it looks as though you're unmuted. So I'll just go ahead and pose the question as written. Sorry about that, Chris. So Senator Ashe and Representative Johnson, Chris's question is, please tell us your strategy to work together to get the Global Warming Solutions Act to the governor's desk and override his veto if necessary.
I think we have the versions between the House and the Senate, like set the money aside for a second. The versions between the House and the Senate are minor. They are barely technical. So I don't think that's a problem. We're fine there. I think then the only question is whether we put the money in the budget or add the money to the bill itself. And there are, again, that's something that the senator and I just need to discuss, and that impacts the timing on the calendar. But the bill got passed back to the House on the last day or day before this the June session ended. So it's waiting for us, and we are going to be acting on it. Absolutely, we absolutely will get it to the governor's desk, and we're just going to be waiting. We're not going to act on it immediately because we want to fit the money piece back in. That's the critical piece that we just talked about with Steve Meyer. And so being able to make sure that is in the budget, and that folks are really nervous about what this budget looks like. So before we go appropriating money off the top, we need to make sure that everybody understands what the full budget looks like, so that they know what priorities they are weighing this against. So expect it to come out, in a few weeks when the House passes its version of the budget. But I have full confidence that we will get that to the governor's desk. And in terms of being able to override if the governor vetoes, that's an excellent question. We had 105 people in the House vote for it, with a few people absent who would normally vote for it as well. So we've had we've had a new House member appointed since then. So she's not on the record. I'm not sure what her take on this is, but we'll be looking carefully to those people who thought it was a good idea in February and And we need to make sure that they continue to think it is a good idea in September. And if for some reason the almost exact same bill is no longer a good reason, well, then I think their district needs to, hold them accountable to that, and they need to be able to really justify why something was a good idea in February and then they failed in September.
And of course, we do hope that the governor doesn't veto it.
Yes.
Thank you for the question, Chris, and for those responses. So the next question is going to be from Diana Chase. So just one second, and I will ask you to join as a panelist, Diana. Oops, sorry, I accidentally invited Costa Pappas. Sorry, Costa, I will put you safely back where you were, not put you on the spot. But Diana, hopefully you'll.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Yep.
Okay. All right. So my question is, you have talked about a lot of interesting bills and ideas and possibilities, and I'd like to know what you're committing to actually passing this year.
Well, I think we were clear that Global Warming Solutions Act is definitely on that list. We've already passed a significant amount of CRF funding that peripherally deals with climate issues by addressing expansion of broadband. And I didn't mention earlier, a lot of investments in housing, heating being our second highest emissions usage. And so both of those help to curb emissions for the long haul. Those are already done. The bill, I've forgotten the number on it, but maybe Senator can help me out here with Efficiency Vermont and looking at expanding the use of energy efficiency money and being able to invest more. So I think that one is very close to finished. It's in the House, ready to go, and then we are nearing the finish line on Act 250. So I think those are, some of those are already done, and the three that I mentioned are things that are very close that we're just going to be wrapping up.
And I would add to that S220, which is the licensure bill, which I think we'll get to the finish line. The Government Operations Committee in the House, of course, has two significant tasks on its plate right now. One is some of the important but less glamorous aspects of our oversight of professionals and sort of classic government functions. Then the other half is a lot of the criminal justice reform items. And so, but we're confident that the 220 can get to the finish line. And then I would also say that the transportation budget, which we've already passed, it will require us to make sure that any revisions to the transportation budget proposed by the administration, that we're making sure to continue on with the sort of transformation investments that are in there. And for the interest of people who do have capacity for more Zoom meetings, I believe the emergency board is meeting on Wednesday of next week. We can maybe have Jared get that out to participants, but the reason we picked the date we did in August to come back is we would by then have revised revenue forecasts for all of the state's funds, including transportation, education, and the general fund. And we wanted to give the administration a couple weeks to take the information and then actually propose a full year budget with it. So we're going to be having to make sure that we're still making progress on all these fronts, but you should keep your eyes out for that emergency board meeting where the information about revenues is going to be disclosed.
Thanks, Senator Ashe. And thank you, Diana, for the question. Just a reminder to folks that if you open up the Q&A icon, you can see the questions that folks are posing, and feel free to continue upvoting. The last time I looked, there was a question from the Vermont Council on Rural Development, which I know Paul Costello unfortunately had to leave the meeting, but he had a question he wanted to pose that was about the possibility of looking to renew the charge and the board of the Vermont Clean Energy Development Fund. I'll just note for context that the director of the Clean Energy Development Fund, Andrew Perchlik, is on the call, and I co-chair that board currently. So we've got some folks on the call who are very familiar with it, and Johanna Miller is also on the board. I don't know if there's any other Clean Energy Development Fund board members. But the question is, could we look at renewing the charge in the board of that to invest more broadly in economic development through enterprise supports for businesses leading market solutions to all aspects of the clean energy and climate economy? I've heard Paul mention this idea before, kind of the idea of a potential shift away from the Clean Energy Development Fund to a climate economy development fund.
I think one of the pieces that I certainly don't know the details nearly as much as the people you mentioned on the calls, but so I think you know, some sort of plan to do that would be helpful if some of the people that you mentioned would be interested in proposing some kind of plan to do that. I know that's been very helpful in the past and has struggled with some funding issues. So, so finding adequate and ongoing funding for the Clean Energy Development Fund is I think would be one of the first steps to renewing that board and giving it an expanded task.
Yeah, and I offer this. This is one of those moments where someone, if I was more coachable, someone would elbow me in the ribs. But I do think it's important that we have a strategic focus and that we invest in a strategic focus. And I know that every state government often feels tempted to do a little bit of everything. And then we struggle to look back and say that we really made the right kind of effort in something you know, that completed the task or really made a huge dent. So I would have to better understand whether this would be a scattershot approach or something much more specific, so that there's one narrative arc that we could all get behind, and that would be my concern, and then would need to kind of be assuaged of that concern.
Thank you both. So for the next question, I'm going to turn to Lori Scharf. So let me just invite you, Lori, to, sorry, just 1 second. Lori should be, there we go.
Hi there. Can you hear me?
Yes, please go ahead. And apologies if I
This is Larry Sharp. No problem. I'm an energy coordinator here in Middlesex, Vermont, and feels like home weatherization is one of those areas that we have the most impact on, and that could have a really significant impact on, you know, our climate contribution. So if you could support a significant amount of funding to weatherization programs like that at Capstone, that would really give us an opportunity to both employ more people in that field and help low-income folks to weatherize their homes and have significant impact. Thank you.
Well, I'll just say I agree, and that in the past, the sort of bedeviling challenge has been how to finance it, and the option that's usually on the table, which has appeal to certain advocates, but not all, is basically a fuel consumption tax of some sort. And I actually think that now, with interest rates so low, and with other jurisdictions with much more track record of comprehensive weatherization programs. I think that this is something that we should be initiating a discussion with the treasurer about a bond for weatherization, which in the past has always also run up against a structural barrier, which is that our treasurer, working with the advisors around state borrowing, have always argued we should borrow less and less. And with interest rates where they are now, I almost feel like it is the single best available tool to do the kind of large expansion of weatherization. And the fact that it's a very labor intensive activity makes the timing quite fortuitous. So that's something that the speaker and I haven't talked about in the sense of, the next, month and a half and what can actually be accomplished. But I think that the stage has to be set in the next couple months to envision a significant bond. Otherwise, I don't think the resources will be sufficient enough using conventional revenue streams to the state. But that's Tim's view. That's not one that the speaker and I have, fleshed out in terms of the total, legislature.
And apologies, Senator, but I'll just offer some context. We've looked at some of the numbers around what it would take for the state to meet its goal around the number of building retrofits since legislation was passed, setting a very ambitious target of, I think it was 80,000 homes weatherized by 2022. We've, gotten about a little over 25,000 homes weatherized. We're on a pace of about 2,000 to 2,500 building retrofits a year. And so to get back on track, or even kind of the model that you've both seen from us on our Path to Paris model on the ability to significantly reduce emissions through that strategy, it would likely mean at a minimum of a 5 times increase in the amount of building retrofits that we're doing. We've heard people talk about a minimum of $100 million a year investment to be able to save folks money and reduce fossil fuel use and invest in the Vermont economy simultaneously through that strategy. So thank you for that question. Speaker Johnson, is there anything else that you would like to say on that?
Just that there have been a number of occasions where we've tried to push more money into that in order to scale up in a massive way. We need some sort of assurance of a long-term funding stream, because by doing it in just a one-shot slug, it's actually incredibly inefficient to get a lot of people geared up to do the training, to hire the people, to get the equipment, to do the work, and then the money goes away. We saw this a number of years ago with, oh gosh, it was, 8 years ago now or so, with a significant amount of ERA money that got geared up, that hung out for a little while. We got a lot done and then scaled back. And so, one of the serious components of this is not just a one-shot slug of money, which we've done where we can, but for a substantial upscaling, we need a long-term sustainable source of money. And and then we are competing with a lot of other needs, both in the energy and efficiency, global warming venues, as well as a lot of other competing needs in the state.
And Jared, just one other thing that I think both the speaker and I have observed, because that recession era stimulus boost in weatherization did wind up, once the money was gone, the rug was pulled out of all the people who'd been ramped up to do the work. And I think one of our challenges, amongst many others, when we come back in late August, is to also be thinking about readying Vermont for any infrastructure bills from Washington that might come our way. So if we start hearing that there might be, for instance, weatherization funds like there were last time, then we need to make sure that that window of time between September and January, when the legislature is gone, we've enabled the dollars to flow in the way that would be most desirable. And weatherization is just one potential use of funds that requires our vigilance.
Thank you both, and thank you for the question, Larry. I'm going to change you back to an attendee, and I'm going to invite Pam Parker to ask her question, or shouldn't, just one second. Pam.
There we go.
I'm still muted now.
No, go
I hear
ahead.
you now.
Okay, so thank you so much for all you're doing, all that everybody's doing. I think we seem to have a consensus that the climate crisis is the biggest challenge facing us. And I wonder if the legislature is considering a Vermont Green New Deal that has putting that at the forefront. Thank you.
As I understood it, a lot of the topic for this conversation was about the 2020 session. So in terms of being able to do that in August, September, that I think we're focused on the other bills that we spoke about earlier, and in terms of a Green New Deal, I think there are a lot of different ways where, while we haven't to date had like one giant spending bill that shifts priorities, there are a lot of ways where we're starting to move things in a different direction, and both in terms of the the structure and where we're encouraging development through things like the Act 250 bill and the energy efficiency bill, but also in terms of where we're holding Vermonters accountable through the Global Warming Solutions Act. And so I think that would be a question for the 21 session, to see, once we've gotten these top few priorities from the EAN checked off, which we're going to do in the next few weeks, what are the next set of priorities? So, I'm open to hearing what a package looks like and what's appropriate for Vermont, but I think that's a question for the 21 session and beyond.
Thank you, Speaker Johnson. Thank you, Pam, for the question. I'm going to now invite Olivia Campbell Anderson from Renewable Energy Vermont to pose her question. Just one moment. And then this just because of time, this will be the last question. And then there are others still there that you can see. But I'll also share, after Olivia asks her question and you've had a chance to respond, I'll share some notes on next steps in closing. But Olivia, please go ahead.
So this is Olivia from Renewable Energy Vermont. Apologies for the casual look. I have no power at my house right now. So so I am following up on discussions related to we all know the importance of energy efficiency and continuing that work and how it helps all Vermonters save money. With the evolution of our vision of how we define efficiency and allowing a more strategic or some intentional focus on transportation and heating solutions, are you willing to support or propose any guidelines or parameters that would make sure those that expansion does not include support for additional fossil fuel infrastructure? I think many who are, who work in the climate space are deeply concerned that, we've got a crisis, we're running out of time, less than 10 years, you know, the impacts of climate change are already here. And when we look at the time frame of investments, that when people buy vehicles or when people buy heating systems, it's typically a 10 to 30-year investment. Many of us feel like we just do not have time or to spend the very limited resources we have enabling in any way additional subsidy to fossil fuel infrastructure. So particularly when the renewable technologies exist fully now, available in the market. So as you are looking to continue moving that efficiency evolution legislation, would you support any more direction or parameters to prohibit any of those funds going to subsidize more efficient fossil fuel types of infrastructure?
Thanks, Olivia. Great question.
Olivia, I follow the question for sure and the urgency of the challenge. I'm maybe not as clear what type of fossil fuel investments motivate the question itself. Can you just say a quick word about how the pilot that's envisioned may sort of have a negative aspect of making investments in fossil fuel infrastructure?
Sure. Well, without, I think, that very clear direction from the legislature, the details often get worked out at the Public Utility Commission through a variety of processes and dockets. But, without that direction, you could, for example, allow that money to be used for an oil boiler that uses less fossil fuel than it used before, or, a vehicle that, maybe was 15 miles per gallon and is now 20 miles per gallon. So they're incremental improvements. And this has been a challenge with efficiency funding before. Something we've worked with through the regulatory process and in conversations with Efficiency Vermont directly. But I think that, without those parameters, it's highly likely that you set yourself up to perhaps giving too much flexibility for how those funds could be used.
Okay, well, I'll say that in addition to keeping our eyes on the PUC docket that's trying to flesh out how this could work on a bigger and more permanent scale, we'll certainly take a look when we come back. And the bill's obviously in the House Energy Technology Committee, but our committee will we'll talk with them about that for sure.
Yeah, and I will base my decisions on, what gets us to the largest reductions in emissions in 5, 10, and 20 years. My worry, so I'm totally open to it. My worry with it is that is the affordability of some of the 100% renewable technologies, even with as much assistance as we can give it. And so if we can move people into a significant, not a small incremental, but a significant incremental sooner, rather than making them wait 15 years to be able to access kind of the best technology, I want to make sure that whatever steps we are taking will get us to the lowest the lowest emissions possible, both in the short and long term.
Thank you, Olivia, for the question, and Senator Ashe and Speaker Johnson for your replies. We started a couple minutes. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Well, but Jared, let me just real quick, Olivia, I will also say this does speak to the larger need to get more of our power renewably in general. As we move to electrification of transportation and heating and all these other things, what's powering that electricity is still not a pretty picture, despite Vermont having a very good renewable energy standard. I mean, right now, electricity in Vermont at this very moment is 3/4 coming from a fossil fuel. So we've got work to do to balance these pressures, our ability to pay, but also having an honest story of clean power to tell.
I would just note that the latest reporting of our electricity sources has Vermont's electricity as 62% renewable and 92% carbon free. So still definitely improvements to be made, but I don't think quite as fossil dependent as
well, Jared, because I'm geeking out, I took the liberty of looking at my ISO to go app, which says the regional grid right now is sending us 73% natural gas, 16% nuclear, 7% renewable, 3 hydro, a little less than 1 oil. So admittedly, Vermont's profile and the regional grid they're interdependent and different regional effort to make
pre-rec accounting and post-rec accounting in compliance with the renewable energy standard.
Right.
Thank you. So with that, we started a couple minutes late. We're going to end just a couple minutes late. I want to thank everyone for joining, and thank you, Senator Ashe and Speaker Johnson. For anyone who wants to see a recording of this, the link to the video will be on our website in the featured news on the front page at eanvt.org. You can also find information on our website. We mentioned our annual summit earlier, which will be held remotely this year, October 1st and 2nd. And we are right now inviting folks to submit proposals for the next set of pitches and proposals and ideas for policies and programs that can move Vermont towards our goals. So check that out on our website. You can also sign up for our newsletter there. But most importantly, thank you all for joining, your attention to these important issues, and to Speaker Johnson and Senator Ashe for your time and leadership, and for joining us today. Thank you, everyone. Take care. Be well.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Bye.
everyone.